Connect with other Christian women to feel seen, heard, known. Hi, I'm Amber L.B. Swenson, writer, blogger, and podcaster for Time of Grace. I was part of Time of Grace's first ever women's event called Unbreakable in 2024. And I want to invite you to join us for our second event, March 28th and 29th, right here at the beautiful Depot in downtown Minneapolis. Why would you want to come? Let me tell you why. Unbreakable was exactly what so many of us have been longing for. It was a chance for women of all ages to connect, to lock arms, to laugh and to cry, to worship and pray. It was Titus 2 in action, women leading women. It was speakers being honest and raw, and women saying, I've been there, or I'm there now, or I get it. It was a time for friends and sisters to reconnect. It was a reminder that we're not alone, that God is good, and there is hope. So join me and other Christian women as we continue to build each other up and learn from one another. Register soon, and I'll see you here in March.
Today's episode is called The Joy of the Lord is Your Strength. This passage is taken straight out of Nehemiah, chapter 8, verse 10, and it's one of those things that we see so often. This is a common, popular passage, but what in the world does it mean? We're going to break it down a little bit and see if we can't get to the bottom of it. Hey, it's Amber, wife, mother, type A child of God. Here are little things we look at everyday issues from a biblical perspective with one simple goal: to know and love God more. Thanks for listening. So first of all, Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the king, King Artaxerxes, in the city of Susa, which is a city in Elam, which is now Iraq. And at the beginning of the book, some people come from Judah. Judah is the territory where Jerusalem was a part of. So some people came from Judah, and he, of course, asked, hey, how are things going? How are things going now that the exiles have returned from Babylon? So God's people in the Old Testament did not obey him. And after many, 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 many warnings, he allowed them to be carried off into captivity to become exiles in Babylon. They were there for 70 years, and then they were allowed, if they wanted to come back to Jerusalem, to Judah. Many of them chose to stay in Babylon because it had been 70 years. They had made lives for themselves. Their sons and daughters had married, and so now their whole family was there. But some chose to go back, and so Nehemiah wanted to know how things were going. And unfortunately, he got very bad news. He heard that the walls were down, they were rubble. Things aren't going well. They're in disgrace. The people are in disgrace in Jerusalem. And when he heard that, he wept, he mourned for several days, he fasted, he prayed. And then he went back to his position as the cupbearer to the king. And as a cupbearer, you should know he didn't just bring the king wine. His job was to taste the wine and make sure it wasn't poisoned. So he worked very closely with the king, and he would have been on friendly terms with the king, and even maybe perhaps a confidant. And so when he went back to his job as cupbearer to the king noticed and said, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. Now, I already love the guy just because of this. There are so many people, and I can be one of them. I'm not throwing anybody else under the bus, but so many times we notice people aren't looking great, or they maybe look a little off. But do we take the time to actually say something? Hey, how are you doing? I can't tell you the number of times that people have said, like, hey, how you doing? And they keep walking, so they don't really want to know the answer to that. They just, it's something to say. But Artaxerxes actually wanted to know. He's like, Nehemiah, why do you look so sad? You're not ill. This is like a sadness of heart. What's going on? I love him already for not being distracted by all he had to do, but by actually taking the time to say, hey, what's up? How are you doing? And then when Nehemiah told him, how can I be happy when the land of my ancestors is in ruins and the people are disgraced. Artaxerxes went further and said, what is it you want? That's why I love the guy. Because he doesn't just notice, he asks. And then when he finds out, he's like, wait, how can I help? It reminds me of the book of James when James says, when you see your brother cold or hungry, don't just say to them, hey, I hope you get warm. I hope you're well fed. Go, God bless you. No, do something to help them. If it's in your power to help, do it. Don't just say, oh, good luck with that. Luck, by the way, is not something we're allowed to say in my house. I know every time any of my kids or my husband say, well, that was so lucky. I'm like, luck had nothing to do with this. It was God. But so anyway, so Artaxerxes said, hey, what do you want? And Nehemiah said, well, I would like to go. I'd like to go and help out. And the king wanted to know how long he'd be gone. And when Nehemiah told him, Artaxerxes said, sure, go for it. And Nehemiah actually did two things that were really, really cool. First of all, when Artaxerxes says, what is it you want? Nehemiah prayed before he answered him. And second of all, Nehemiah was bold. He was considerably bold in what he asked, because he asked, first of all, to leave his job, leave his duties to go do what was on his heart. And then when the king said, okay, that's fine, Nehemiah didn't stop there. He went further. He said, great. So could I have letters? So I had safe passage there. And then could you contact the guy who's in charge of your timber and beams? Because I'm going to need some supplies when I get to Jerusalem in order to rebuild the walls. And the answer was yes. Now, why was Nehemiah so bold? Two things. Nehemiah knew the king. They were friendly. They were confidants. He knew who he was, so he didn't have any problem going to his friend to ask for help. And two, Nehemiah knew what the king was capable of. He was not asking too much. If your head isn't spinning right now, if you are not just smiling in joy, thinking about the implications this has for our relationship with God the Father, let me just break it down. When we know God, when you know you are a child of God, you are not just some stranger, you're not some, afterthought, mistake, whatever, off in the corner. God doesn't know your name. No, Scripture tells us, not only does God know our name, His eyes are always on us. He knows every hair on our head. He knows us in and out. He knows our coming, our going, our lying down, our standing, sitting, whatever. He knows it all, and He knows the motives of our heart. He knows it all. So when you know that God knows you, you're not afraid to go to Him to ask. And when you know what He is capable of, you know that nothing you ask is too much to ask for God. Why not go big? God can always say no. He doesn't have to give me all I want. He is not my genie. God has already given me everything I need. What I really needed was a way to get to Him, a way to overcome death. I could not do that on my own. I could not make things right with God on my own. And God took care of that. He sent Jesus, His Son, who lived the perfect life, then died on the cross in my place, paid for my sins so that I don't have to worry about it. So that's done. God doesn't have to give me anything more. And yet He glories in giving me more. He glories in giving me my daily bread. He wants me to have what I need each day. And that's mind-boggling to me, except for that I know how much I love my children. And when I realize how much I love to make sure that my children have what they need, it's not surprising to me that God is happy to give me what I want and what I need. Not always what I want, but what I need each day. The food that I need, the clothes that I need, the warmth that I need, whatever it is that I need, God gives me each day what I need to get through each day. So many times we cannot articulate what it is we want. We go about our days just, complaining or mad or frazzled and wound up. And why are you so angry? Why are you wound up? Why are you in such a bad mood? What's going on? Well, this person isn't driving the way I want them to drive ahead of me, because everybody on the road should, drive the way you want them to drive. Never mind sometimes that you want them to sin. Sometimes the reason you're so angry is because the people ahead of you aren't speeding. Never mind that. But so many times we're angry because people aren't doing things the way we think that they should be doing them. If only everybody would live the way I live and the way I think things are right, then I would be happy. Who says you're right? Who says that that's the way things should be done just because you do it that way? How self-centered are we? We are. We're so ridiculously self-centered. But a lot of times we can't articulate what it is we want. If God were to say to us today, what is it you want? What would you answer that? How would you answer that to say, this is what I really like, and then I would be A, B, C, D, or E. I would be a better child of God, or I would be more dedicated to you, or I would be able to do what? False. So often, all those things are false. If you had a bigger house, would you really be more dedicated to God? If all your bills were paid, would you really put your time into serving Him? Because this is what we're told. Whoever can be trusted with little can be trusted with much. If you're not serving God now, when you have little, why do you think you'll serve God more when you have much? If you're not giving to God now, when you have little, why do you think you'd be more generous if He gave you more? Really, the way that we respond to what God gives us, whatever it is, children, property, ministry, whatever it is, shows God how well we would deal with it if He were to give us more. So when you ask yourself, as I hope you do, I hope this episode has you asking yourself, how would I answer that question? What is it you want? Do a little self-reflection, self-evaluation. Am I just selfish and I want people to be more like me and do things my way all the time? Or do I really want more of the things of God, things like faith or patience, in order that I might serve Him better? I want more ministry opportunities. Like, give me more. Do more for, I want to do more for your people. What does that look like? When you're asking for more ministry, it's not more money. Ministry is service. If you want more ministry, go for it. Look at all the things that need to be done right where you are. Who are the neighbors you could serve? Who are the people that you could serve in your community? What could you do at your church? That's what ministry is. Please, if you are feeling that nudge, do more ministry. God, you can ask Him for opportunities, but all you have to do is open your eyes. Ask a few people. Ask just a few of us. I really would like to get involved in ministry. What do you see that I could do? Let me tell you. Let me tell you where we need people. So Nehemiah goes, gets the supplies. He's so bold. He gets the supplies, gets everything he needs, arrives in Jerusalem. 52 days later, the wall is completed. Major project finished, done. Woohoo. Move on. So on the 7th month, the first day of the 7th month, which was their New Year, they were celebrating the Feast of Trumpets, and all the people gathered. And when they gathered, Ezra, who was a contemporary of Nehemiah, he read the book of the law. And as he was reading the book of the law, we're told that the people were getting instructions from the Levites. So the Levites were coming around and explaining what this means, what the book of the law means. This is what this means. And as they were doing this, the people who were all gathered there, they started weeping. Why were they weeping? Well, they may have been weeping because it had been a long time since they had heard the book of the law. They had been exiles in Babylon. They may have been weeping because they realized what God had asked them to do and how much they had strayed from that. They may have been weeping because they were repentant. They realized that they didn't want to live in opposition to God. They wanted to do things God's ways. And so they were crying. And as they were crying, Nehemiah got up and he addressed the people and he said, "Go and enjoy food and sweet drinks, and send some to those who have nothing prepared. This day is holy to our Lord. Do not grieve, for the joy of the Lord is your strength." The Levites calmed all the people, saying, "Be still, for this is a holy day. Do not grieve." Then all the people went away to eat and drink, to send portions of food, and to celebrate with great joy, because they now understood the words that had been made known to them. I love that the Levites told the people to be still. It's okay. That's the gospel. Yeah, you're sorry, and maybe you screwed up. Be still. Don't worry about it. You don't have to make it up. God is taking care of it. He's got it all under control. Go now and rejoice in peace. Okay, so what does this phrase mean? The joy of the Lord is your strength. First of all, what does the word joy mean? Joy is happiness that is not dependent on circumstances. It's a feeling of well-being or contentment. So it doesn't matter if the sun is shining. If you woke up feeling good, looking good, your best weight or your worst weight, it doesn't matter how anybody in your family or in the condo complex is acting. Even if the neighbor next to you is grumpy, or your coworker who shares a cubicle with you is grumpy or short with you, or your coworker doesn't answer your texts, whatever it is, that has nothing to do with your joy. Your joy is that sense of well-being that you have because it is rooted and grounded in the Lord. The joy of the Lord. So the word "of" there, it's a relationship between a part and a whole. So a sleeve is a part of a shirt. The sleeve is not the shirt. It's a part of. Our joy is just one aspect of God, and it's one of the byproducts that we get when we spend time with God. The more that we are in the Word, the more that we grow spiritually, the more that we walk with God and find Him to be trustworthy and good no matter what. Even when things don't go my way, God is trustworthy and good. The more that we find that, the more we go through hard times and we see God's faithfulness. Yeah, He doesn't rescue us all the time, especially not immediately. He allows us to be refined, shaped, molded. The more that we spend that time with God and the more we see who He is, the more the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5 becomes part of us. So the fruit is a byproduct of spending time with God. What is the fruit of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. If you want to study these, I was part of a great project that really goes into these in depth. It's called In God's Orchard. It's a Bible study. It's available through Northwestern Publishing House. I was just 1/6 of it. There were 6 of us authors who worked on it, and it's a phenomenal tool to get you in the fruit of the Spirit, to really see what it is and how you can live that out. With that, I'm not going to go into the fruit right here, but just know that the joy of the Lord is true contentment, knowing that God has done everything that we couldn't. He's taking care of us spiritually. He's paid the price. It is finished. It's done. We don't have to worry about that. And because we don't have to worry about that, our greatest need is taken care of. Now, does that mean that we should be walking around with, these huge smiles on our face all day long, every day? No. There are times to mourn. Look at the book of Nehemiah. It begins with Nehemiah in mourning. He found out bad news. And because of it, he spent days fasting, praying, mourning, weeping. I went to a funeral yesterday. that is not the time to walk around with a huge smile on your face, although I did for the vast majority of the funeral, because it was a dear friend of mine, a woman who had gone to many, many, many of my Bible studies for years. And I picked her up a lot of times. She had quit driving a couple of years ago, and she was a couple blocks from my house. So I would drive over and pick her up, and then drive and pick up another woman who also died. They're both in heaven together. Go to church and then go to our Bible study. But I had this smile on my face, even though it was a funeral, because we had so many amazing memories together. She was such a godly woman. And when we were sitting at the funeral of the other woman, the second woman that I picked up, when we were sitting together, this woman and I, we started laughing at that funeral, and we realized that we could not sit together at a funeral because we got giggly all of a sudden. And so yesterday, several times during the funeral, I just smiled, thinking of the wonderful times we had and the wonderful time she is having right now, part of the whole company of hosts in heaven. I'm so happy for her. So even though it is sad, I can certainly be joy-filled because she was a godly woman and she's gone home. Having said that, there were multiple people that I talked to at the funeral who are going through some seriously hard times. And there are good reasons to fall before the Lord and beg for mercy and beg for help and bring our friends before the throne of God. Dr. James Dobson said once, there are two kinds of people in this world. There are those who are suffering, and there are those who will suffer. So if you're not in a season of suffering currently, we know days are coming that you will, because we live in a sinful world, and sometimes others suffer, and then it's our chance to walk beside them and help them out. Sometimes we're suffering, and others have a chance to walk beside us and help us out. That is the body of Christ. Walking through this veil of tears together, helping, encouraging, loving one another as we go through this. So just because we have joy and peace and contentment in God, it doesn't mean that we will always be smiling. It just means that at the end of the day, the thing that we need most is taken care of. And we can put our troubles down at God's feet and walk away content, knowing He can take care of them. That's what Hannah did in the book of 1 Samuel. She was in a really rough situation. She was barren. She couldn't have a baby. God closed her womb. Her husband's other wife, Peninnah, made her life miserable. She was called her rival, and she provoked her. Year after year after year, she made Hannah miserable. And Hannah went to the house of the Lord. She prayed. And when she left, she was no longer downcast. Even though she was going through something absolutely miserable, she was able to pray and give it to God. And when she did, she left it with God. She knew she couldn't fix the situation. She could not fix Peninnah, and she could not give herself a baby. She had tried. She was barren. And that means that her impossible situation, she put on God's shoulders. She gave them to Him, and then she walked away, no longer downcast. She could have that feeling of joy, of contentment, knowing God would take care of the situation one way or the other. He would give her the strength to get through it, or He would give her a child. Ultimately, she knew God was worthy of her praise. And that's where her joy came from. And we can do the same. Even in our suffering, even in our really, really tough situations. That's why we can have joy. Now, I want to end with this little paragraph from my Concordia Study Bible. I just found it really interesting and neat. It was in the introduction to Nehemiah, and it says this: Nehemiah foreshadows Jesus' ministry of restoration. Both give up a high position to identify with the plight of their people. Both come with a specific mission. Both fulfill it. Both show a prayerful dependence on God. Isn't that great? Oh man, Nehemiah, such an interesting, really good book. Such a great phrase from the book of Nehemiah that should encourage us, help us, remind us where to get our strength, where to get our peace, where to get our contentment. This has been Little Things, because in God's kingdom, the little things are the big things.